Good morning. In today's session, we are going to review the second reading comprehension passage which appeared in slot 1 of IIM-CAT 2022 examination. Its first sentence was, critical theory of technology is a political theory of modernity with a normative dimension. The best way to benefit from this session is that I want you to download this passage and its questions from the link which has been provided in the description. And then I want you to attempt this passage and all the 4 questions in 10 minutes honestly. After you've done that, then I'm going to discuss the ideal way of attempting these questions in the passage, and this is a method which is called as nudge practice. During this session, I want you to focus upon trying to understand how I go in for doing paraphrasing of questions language, options language, and the language of the key sentences from the passage. At the same time, I also want you to see how I identify the question types and use the particular strategy to handle that particular question type. Also, look at how critical mapping is done and do a revision of your process of elimination along with me. This passage, which appeared in IIM-CAT 2022, the second passage, it was picked up from a book by the name of A Companion to Philosophy of Technology by John Kerr, Berg, Olson et al. This book covers the impact of technology on society and our lives, and Berg is basically a professor from the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and he teaches theory of science, philosophy, and technology. The difficulty level of this particular passage was 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, which means it was the most difficult passage possible which appears in IIM-CAT. It was a passage which belonged to the argumentative genre, so it was difficult to read, difficult to understand, difficult to grasp, difficult to simplify. And obviously, in case of difficult passages, the questions which are framed are also the ones which are difficult. This was picked up from the middle of a chapter, as a result of which it did not have a head or tail with it, and this made the context missing in case of this passage, so students would have found a greater amount of problem in handling this passage. It had a total of 5 paragraphs and 526 words, which is roughly the standard length of passages which are appearing in case of IIM-CAT these days. This is what the passage looked like, and if you look at the questions which were framed upon it, the questions were not simple. Questions were more complex. If I look at the first question which appeared here, the 5th question, then this was a compound question which was made by clubbing 2 different aspects being tested together. The presence of the word inferred clearly shows that it is a specific question of the implied idea type. At the same time, the presence of the keyword supporting clearly shows that this is a question which is of the perception category as well and is a strengthening question. So when 2 things get tested in the same question, then automatically it becomes a much more complicated question, and there's a greater chance of you making a mistake. The next question was a question which used the word contradicts, which shows that it's a factual negation question. At the same time, because it is talking about the arguments of the passage, so automatically it was a perception weakening category of question as such. The next question, when you look at it, it focused upon the argument of the 4th paragraph of the passage, which means it was clearly a perception question where you had to identify the argument of one particular paragraph, the 4th paragraph of the whole passage as such. The last question on this particular passage was again a compound question, which was, it used the word inferred, which indicates it is an implied idea question. At the same time, the presence of the keyword except shows it is also a factual negation question. So 2 things getting tested at the same time. Now, let's look at the difficulty in this passage. Because this passage belonged to the argumentative genre, so reading, understanding the passage was difficult. At the same time, more difficult questions were framed upon it. 3 of the questions were compound questions testing you for 2 things at the same time. And 1 question was a perception question, and perception questions are actually difficult questions. So, when we look at this particular passage, the first step in any case is to read the passage. And this reading has to be done in 2 rounds. In the first round, you need to read the whole passage casually like a story. And this is something which is enough to do or handle the specific questions. General and perception questions would require a more careful reading a second time and preparing something called as a critical map of the passage. Now, when you do the quick and casual first reading, then you need to get something out of it also. There has to be certain return. There are 3 returns which we're looking at. you, after having read the passage, need to have a clear idea about what is this passage about. So if a friend of yours asks you what is this passage about, then you should be in a position to give a one sentence long answer. A second take from this particular passage reading should be that you need to have a slight idea about what is present where in the passage. And you especially have to focus upon presence of nouns and adjectives in certain locations of the passage, because questions would be framed from the same areas where nouns and adjectives are present. Moreover, you need to identify which genre does this passage belong to. There are a total of 5 genres. If you have a clear idea about which genre this passage belongs to, then automatically you will understand the challenges which will definitely be there in this passage, and you will be able to confront them in a better manner. So, let's start with a casual quick reading. After having done a casual quick reading, you should be in a position to figure out the topic of the passage. This topic of the passage is also important for your map of the passage, which you will prepare at a later stage. So, if I do a quick and casual reading of the passage and somebody asks me what is this passage about, then my answer would be, this passage is about how technology affects society by maintaining social orders of power with a normative dimension. Understand 2-3 things out here. When it talks about normative dimensions, then we are talking about maintaining the status quo. And when we are talking about social orders of power, then we are talking about politics, we are talking about dominance, we are talking about hierarchical orders which are maintained in society. That is what politics is all about. So, after I've identified the topic of the passage, my next step is that I need to read the first paragraph carefully. And once I've read the first paragraph carefully, then I need to write down the argument of this paragraph. Every paragraph has an idea that it explains. We also call it as the argument of the paragraph. After having read the first paragraph, the argument which I could find out was that critical theory of technology is based on established political established norms. Human rights seem center stage during this process, but centralization of powerful organizations impose authoritarian social order. Remember, the word political has to do with dominance, it has to do with hierarchical structures in society, and when we talk about established norms, then established norms means maintenance of the status quo. So things do not change, the same power structures remain. I move on to the second paragraph, read it carefully, and after having read it carefully, I prepare a map of this particular paragraph, and that idea of the paragraph is that the critical theory of technology is based on capitalist rationalization of production, example in a factory. So this whole critical theory of technology is based upon how capitalists rationalize production, say in case of a factory. And technology is shaped by a solution to the problems of commanding a disempowered and a de-skilled labor force. This creates a social order, and a democratic political task is to take care that this does not happen. Releasing technology from this project is a democratic political task. Then I go about reading the third paragraph, simplify it, and this paragraph is saying that technology determines our way of life and is designed to create centers of power, many other social values and their meanings. And this critical theory of technology studies lessons of histories of technology also. Then I go about reading the next paragraph, the fourth one, understand it, simplify it, and then I write down the map of this particular paragraph. This paragraph says, technology similar to laws and customs shapes people. Here dimensions of human nature, property, parental authority, automobiles are important and they get sanctioned by the society. Now I move to the fifth paragraph. Read it, understand it, simplify it, paraphrase it, and identify what is the idea or what is the argument of this particular paragraph. And this paragraph is saying that notion of representation implies lived nature, which is limited to history, not things before history. The context of dimensions of human nature are recognized by society. They are also granted theoretical legitimacy. So those dimensions of human nature which are acceptable to society are granted theoretical legitimacy. This is what this paragraph tells us about. Now this whole thing, the topic and the idea of rest of the paragraphs and all the rest of the paragraphs is something which is called as a critical map of this passage. This helps us handle all the general questions and helps us handling the perception questions as well. So if I look at question number 5, which says which one of the following statements could be inferred as supporting the arguments of the passage, then remember the first step is to read, understand and paraphrase the question in simple language. And in the process, we need to identify what type of a question it is. It is a compound question which brings together specific implied idea question along with the perception strengthening question. The presence of the word inferred is what makes it an implied idea question. The presence of the word supporting is what makes it a strengthening question. So these are two key words which are present in the language of the question, because of which I can get an idea what kind of a question it is. When I paraphrase this particular question's language, then this question is saying which statement seems to infer that it is supporting the arguments of the passage. So I'll keep that in my mind, and then I'll have to prepare my own answer based upon this particular question. And when I prepare my own answer, because it is talking about arguments of the passage, this is the reason why I need to keep the whole passage in my mind when I'm answering this particular question. The answer could be spread anywhere, would be present anywhere. The argument of the passage, remember, is that the technology affects individuals in society. This is the focus of the whole passage. So I move on to the first answer choice, which says the romantic conceptions of nature referred to by the passage is the one that requires theoretical legitimacy. Now, the presence of the words romantic conception, which is the key word, gives me an idea that the last part of the passage contains my key sentence, which contains the key words as such, romantic conception. And I go in for reading this particular sentence carefully. This sentence is saying we can perhaps admit a less romantic conception in which those dimensions of human nature which are recognized by society are also granted theoretical legitimacy. It's a complicated sentence, so I need to simplify it. And after simplification or paraphrasing, this sentence becomes, in the less romantic conception, socially accepted dimensions of human nature are also granted theoretical legitimacy. Once I'm clear about the meaning of this key sentence, then I compare it with the answer choice, and I will realize that the answer choice is talking about this thing requires theoretical legitimacy, while the sentence in the passage, the key sentence, is saying that they get granted theoretical legitimacy. There's a difference between granting and requiring. As a result of which, first answer choice is kicked out, it is a wrong answer. Now I look at the second answer choice. It says technologies form the environmental context and shape the contours of human society. It is talking about the environmental part, and I can see technologies as an environment being mentioned in case of the third paragraph. So this is my key sentence, and I read it. This sentence, it says, in accordance with this general line of thought, critical theory of technology regards technologies as an environment rather than as a collection of tools we live today with, and even within technologies determine our way of life. In simple language, after paraphrasing, this sentence says critical theory of technology regards technologies as an environment rather than as a collection of tools that determine our way of life. Based upon this, when I look at second answer choice, then this is definitely correct. It matches the key sentence given in the passage very clearly. There is nothing objectionable. We'll keep it, and if I'm 100% sure, I'll possibly stop solving the question further and I will mark second as the answer. But that is not a good idea, because in case of all questions of IIM-CAT, because of the confusions which are created in the answer choices, it is better to check all the answer choices even if you found a perfect answer. So let's move on to the third answer choice. It says nature decides the point at which society loses its capacity to control history. This is talking about nature and controlling of history. So I go back to the passage and try to figure out where is this mentioned in the passage. Now this nature and control part is mentioned in the last paragraph. This is my key sentence. I read this sentence carefully, and this sentence says, on these terms, nature is what lies at the limit of history, at the point at which society loses the capacity to imprint its meaning on things and control them effectively. In simple language, this sentence is saying that nature lies at the limit of history, and history decides the point till which society can affect and control things. Based upon this, when I look at the third option, which says nature decides the point, then remember the sentence in the passage said history decides the point. This is the reason why third option is wrong, and we will kick it out. Now we look at the fourth answer choice. It says it is not human nature but human culture that is represented by institutions such as law and customs. When I read this option, then this particular option is talking about laws and customs. So I go back to the passage to see where laws and customs are mentioned. They're mentioned here in case of the fourth paragraph, first line itself. This sentence becomes my key sentence, and I read it carefully. This particular sentence is saying, as an environment, technologies shape their inhabitants. In this respect, they are comparable to laws and customs. Each of these institutions can be said to represent those who live under their sway through privileging certain dimensions of their human nature. In simple language, this sentence is saying, like laws and customs, technologies affect inhabitants by privileging certain dimensions of their individuals. These institutions, laws and customs and technologies, they represent people living under them. But this is not what matches this answer choice as such. Compare this paraphrase sentence with this option. They're not the same. This contradiction which is mentioned in case of the fourth option is not mentioned in case of the paraphrase sentence. This is the reason why the fourth option gets kicked out also. As a result of which, now I'm left with this situation, and answer choice 2 becomes the correct answer. Okay, now let's look at this next question. Remember that the first step is that you've got to paraphrase the question, simplify its language, and you also have to take care that you identify which type of question it is. This particular question, because it uses the word contradicts, so it is definitely a factual negation question. At the same time, because it is talking about the argument of the passage, that is the reason why it is a perception question. Overall, it's a perception weakening question. So, the question says which of the following statements contradicts the arguments of the passage. In simple language, the question is asking which statement goes against the arguments of the passage. When we look at answer choices, we need to get proof from the passage. First answer choice says the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force gave rise to similar patterns of capitalist rationalization of production wherever masses were organized. Now, this is something which is mentioned here. In case of second paragraph, this is the part which talks about disempowered, de-skilled labor force, which is the key words here. And this key sentence in simple language is saying that powerful organizations impose an authoritarian social order because of the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force wherever masses are organized, whether it be Foucault's prisons or Habermas's public sphere, the same pattern prevails. When we compare it with this answer choice, then it matches, is correct. We move on to the next option, which says Marx's understanding of the capitalist rationalization of production and Marcuse's understanding of the project of technological rationality share theoretical inclinations. So I go back to the passage and see where are Marx and Marcuse mentioned together. These are the keywords, and I can see that happening in case of the second paragraph. I read the second paragraph to get an idea, and then this paragraph is saying that Marx attributed this trajectory to capitalist rationalization of production. Marcuse would later point to a project as a basis of what he called, rather confusingly, technological rationality. This is something which is matching the information in the second option. As a result, option second is perfectly correct. Then we move on to the third option, which says masses are organized in patterns set by Foucault's prisons and Habermas's public sphere. So I'll have to go back to the part where this Foucault's prison and Habermas's public sphere are mentioned. They are there in the second paragraph. I read this second paragraph, this particular part, and this part says Marx attributed this trajectory to the capitalist rationalization of production. Today it marks many institutions besides a factory in every modern political system, including so-called socialist systems. This trajectory arose from the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force, but everywhere that masses are organized, whether it be Foucault's prisons or Habermas's public sphere, the same pattern prevails. So if I simplify the language of this particular sentence, this part is saying, under capitalist rationalization of production, technology is used to command or control wherever masses are organized, whether it be one place or other. And this answer choice was saying masses are organized in patterns which are set by Foucault's prisons and Habermas's public sphere. This is something which disagrees with the information given in the passage. So this is contradicting, this is different. This is probably the right answer, but we need to check option 4 as well. So when I look at option number 4, it says paradoxically the capitalist rationalization of production is a mark of so-called socialist systems as well. So I'll have to go back to the passage to see where socialist and this particular part has been mentioned. And I can see socialist systems being mentioned here. I read this particular part, it says Marx attributed this trajectory to the capitalist rationalization of production. Today it marks many institutions besides the factory in every modern political system, including so-called socialist systems. In simple language, this particular part is saying that under capitalist rationalization of production, command or control is required in institutions besides the factory and every modern political system, including so-called socialist systems. This is something which agrees with whatever is written in the fourth option. So this fourth option also agrees with the arguments of the passage. The only answer choice which does not agree with the arguments of the passage is the third one, which automatically ends up becoming our answer. So third one is wrong according to the passage. So it is the answer that will give us marks, because the question was asking us for the statement which contradicts the arguments of the passage. Factual negation. Let's move on to the seventh question, which says, which one of the following statements best reflects the main argument of the fourth paragraph of the passage? So this particular question has to be paraphrased and identified. It is a perception question which is asking us to evaluate the argument given in the fourth paragraph. So in simple language, the question is saying what is the argument of the fourth paragraph of the passage. This is the fourth paragraph. I go in for reading it, and then I look at the options. First option says technology, laws and customs are not unlike each other if considered as institutions. Once I read this particular paragraph, after paraphrasing, it is saying that institutions such as technologies, like laws and customs, shape their inhabitants by privileging certain dimensions of human nature such as property ownership, parental care and automobiles. These human interests are sanctioned by the society also. But if I look at this answer choice, this agrees with it. Technology, laws and customs are not unlike each other if considered as institutions. Let's look at the second option. It says automobiles represent the interest in mobility present in human nature. This is not what this paragraph is really saying. It does not say that automobiles represent the interest in mobility present in human nature. This is not the argument of the fourth paragraph. This is not the focus of the fourth paragraph as such. Similarly, if I look at the third option, it says technologies, laws and customs are comparable but dissimilar phenomena. Match it with the information of the fourth paragraph. Does the fourth paragraph say this? Does the fourth paragraph say that technology, laws and customs are comparable but they are dissimilar phenomena? This is not mentioned. This is the reason why I kick out the third choice. We move on to the fourth one. The fourth option says technological environments privilege certain dimensions of human nature as effectively as laws and customs. If I read this particular part, then I will realize that whatever words have been used here in case of the fourth option, they've been used here also. But this part, this comparison of being as effective as, is not written here in the fourth paragraph at all. This is the reason why the fourth option goes out, and we are left with this situation, as a result of which the chosen answer will be the first one. The first answer choice, it reflects the main argument of the fourth paragraph of the passage. Let's come to the last question, which says all of the following claims can be inferred from the passage except. Now, in case of this particular question, the word infer tells me that it is a question of specific implied idea. Apart from the fact that this question also uses the keyword except, which makes it a factual negation question. So I'll have to pick up an answer which is not written in the passage or contradicts the information of the passage. Three answer choices can be inferred, one cannot be inferred. That is the one which we've got to find out. So if I look at the first one, it says the critical theory of technology argues that as issues of human rights become more prominent, we lose sight of the ways in which the social order becomes more authoritarian. I paraphrase the question, identify the question type, and then I go back to the passage to find where is something on these lines mentioned in the passage. This particular answer choice is talking about human rights, and human rights are mentioned in the first paragraph itself. This becomes my key sentence, which says advances in the formal claims of human rights take center stage while the background centralization of ever more powerful public institutions and private organizations imposes an authoritarian social order. So this is what the key sentence is saying, and when I paraphrase it and I match it up with the answer choice, then this is definitely correct according to the passage. The answer choice matches the key sentence. Now we move on to the second answer choice, which says analyses of technologies must engage with the social histories to be able to reveal their implicit and explicit meanings for us. It's talking about social histories. Social histories is mentioned in the third paragraph. I read this particular part, which acts like a key sentence for me. And this key sentence says, a hermeneutics of technology must make explicit the meanings implicit in the devices we use and the rituals they script. Social histories of technologies such as bicycle, artificial lighting, and firearms have made important contribution to this type of analysis. When I match it up with the second answer choice, then the second answer choice is perfectly correct according to it. We move on to the third one. The third answer choice says technologies seek to privilege certain dimensions of human nature at a high cost to lived nature. Now, privileging certain dimensions of human nature is my keyword. I go back to the passage and I read that particular sentence which talks about it. And this key sentence is saying that institutions such as technologies, laws and customs shape the inhabitants and represent those who live under their sway by privileging certain dimensions of human nature such as property, parental authority, automobiles, represent interests and are sanctioned by the society. But this part nowhere mentions that it is done at a high cost to lived nature. This is the reason why the third answer choice does not agree with the claims made in the passage. and it is a wrong one. Let's check the fourth option also to be more sure about the accuracy of an answer. Fourth option says, the significance of parental authority to children's safety does not therefore imply that parental authority is a permanent aspect of human nature. Now, parental authority is something which is mentioned in case of the fourth paragraph. This is my key sentence. And this is saying parental authority represents the interest of childhood in safety and growth. So this is something which works only during childhood. That is what it says. It is not a permanent aspect of human nature. This is the reason why this option is correct. As a result of which, I am left with this situation where the third option is wrong according to the passage, and the first, second and the fourth option, they are correct, and we end up marking 3 as the answer to this question. Now, as a follow-up to this particular session, in later sessions we will learn concepts tested on IIM-CAT and XAT, and we learn the ideal way of answering previous year questions that have already appeared on IIM-CAT and XAT. Also, I want you to comment your feedback. Did you like this particular session? Could you benefit from it? Is there something that I can do to make it even better for you? If you've liked it, I want you to like this video as well. Subscribe to this channel so that you do not miss any further videos. And you can also share this particular video with your friends who will benefit out of this. That's all for today. Bye.